Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of hushed footsteps, flickering candlelight, and let us not the crunchy, lunchtime kind, but the soft, bold variety someone once thought could cure insomnia. Imagine yourself lying in a heavy four-poster bed, wrapped into many wool blankets, the scent of beeswax candles mixing faintly with something green and vegetal. The chamber is so quiet, you could hear a needle drop except you're not allowed to drop anything. Welcome to the Victorian approach to sleeplessness, where bedtime was a battleground, and lettuce was a weapon. You probably won't survive this. I mean, you'll live, but if you were truly trapped in this era, you'd be buried under 10 pounds of moral guilt, one poorly ventilated bedroom, and a desperate hope that butterhead lettuce might somehow sedate your nerves. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget leave a comment with your location and what time it is right now where you are. Let's see who's trying to sleep at 2 a.m. now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle into a small bedroom lined with dark floral wallpaper, the smell of camphor clinging to the curtains. The fire in the grate is low, throwing long shadows onto the floorboards. You've been advised perhaps by a stiff doctor with a faint tremor in his mustache that your insomnia stems from overexertion of the faculties, and that something leafy might fix you. Not spinach, not kale, but lettuce, specifically, the white, milky sap of lettuce called lactucarium was thought to possess soporific properties. The Victorians, ever resourceful and ever vaguely superstitious, turned to this humble salad ingredient in pursuit of sleep. You're handed a cup of boiled lettuce water, served warm like weak tea, and expected to sip it slowly. While lying completely still, historians still argue whether this infusion had any real effect or if it was simply the calming ritual bowling, steeping, sipping that coaxed the brain into quiet. You drink it anyway, because it's better than another night of pacing the hallway in your nightgown. Listening to the sound of your own brain spiraling into tomorrow's problems, the candle beside your bed is guttering. Victorian bedrooms were dimly lit, often on purpose. Bright light was considered stimulating, a danger to the nerves. You wouldn't dare read in bed. Doctors warned it would inflame your brain. So instead, you stare at the ceiling and let your mind wander, which was probably just as risky. You glance at the clock, a loud, overachieving contraption on the mantel. It ticks like it's trying to scare mice out of the walls. You've been told that silence is essential for restful sleep, and yet here you are, surrounded by the amplified sounds of your own housepipes, groaning, wood creaking, a mouse plotting rebellion behind the wainscoting. Still, you remain perfectly still. Stillness, after all, was half the cure. Movement meant agitation, agitation meant nerves. And nerves, well, those could ruin your whole future. You take another sip of lettuce water. It tastes like someone accidentally boiled a garden and didn't apologize. Yet you find yourself lulled not by the flavor, but by the act itself. The Victorian bedtime was full of these tiny ceremonies. Every step between dressing in your linen nightshirt and snuffing the candle had meaning. Each task was calibrated to tell your body, now we sleep, and yet you don't, so you lie back, eyes fluttering in the half-dark. Your body aches in strange places, your toes are hot, your fingers cold. The feather mattress dips uncomfortably in the middle, and you wonder, vaguely, whether insomnia is a spiritual failing. You wouldn't be the first. The Victorians, equal parts romantic and ruthlessly judgmental, often believed that poor sleep was a punishment for weak moral fiber. Maybe you read too many French novels. Maybe you skipped church last week. Maybe you simply think too much. That thought spirals, and now sleep is even farther away. You pull the covers higher, adjust the pillow again to soft, then to firm, and glance toward the window. It's been tightly shut, draped in heavy velvet. Fresh air was another great Victorian debate. Some physicians demanded open windows, others warned it could invite in night chills and bad humors. So now you sleep in stale air, suffocating gently for your health. Somewhere, a dog barks, or a child cries. Or perhaps it's your imagination. Either way, you've officially entered the most dangerous part of the Victorian night, the hour where insomnia drips like slow poison into your thoughts. But don't worry. Tomorrow, your doctor will prescribe you something else, perhaps a tonic. Perhaps a calming spoonful of syrup that smells like peppermint and works a little too well. But tonight, you are here. Alone with your lettuce water, alone with the sound of your own heartbeat, and the terrible certainty that you are failing at something as natural as sleep. Outside, gas lamps flicker in the fog. Somewhere, a hansom cab clatters by. And inside, you sink slowly into your mattress, held down not by sleep, but by the ritual of pretending to sleep, the sacred choreography of silence, darkness, stillness, and one very soggy vegetable. The milk is warm. You can smell the nutmeg before it reaches your lips, that dusty, slightly exotic scent that Victorian matrons swore by. It's late, your eyelids ache with exhaustion, but you've been told this boiled milk will soothe your nerves, coat your stomach, and calm your ever-racing thoughts. If not, at least it will keep you busy for 10 more sleepy minutes before the long night resumes its vigil. You cradle the ceramic cup in both hands. It's lukewarm now, maybe a little congealed at the edges, and someone's added a pinch of sugar to coax your compliance. You sip slowly. You were advised by your doctor, likely a man with impressive whiskers and a fondness for euphemisms, that this milk contains within it the lull of midnight. Whether or not that's true, the effort of sipping feels like obedience, and in the Victorian world of health, obedience was a treatment all its own. You aren't alone, not entirely. Somewhere in the darkened hallway outside your room, a nursemaid lingers. She doesn't speak unless spoken to. She is trained to tread softly, to close doors with reverent care, to hush babies and adults alike with the same gentle authority. Taid silence. You wonder if she ever truly sleeps, or if she simply trades in the art of making others appear to. Back in bed, you shift slightly under the covers. You've been advised not to move too much. Too much shifting disturbs the humors. You remember the advice of Miss Nightingale, who declared that silence, stillness, and darkness were the natural healers of the sick. Whether the sick included the sleepless is still debated. Historians argue whether these rituals were sincere treatments or socially enforced theater for the upper classes who could afford to pretend at fragility. A creak from the hallway startles you. Just the nursemaid again. She's retreating down the corridor, slippered feet making soft contact with the polished floorboards. You picture her sitting just beyond the door, hands folded, waiting for what? Exactly. For the moment when silence fails and sleep doesn't come. When you rise again, disturbed and disturbing, requesting another tonic, another treatment, another monologue about your poor, beleaguered nerves. Your cup is now empty. You place it on the nightstand with careful hands. The ceramic makes the faintest clink against the wood, and you wince. Nose, even the gentlest kind, is discouraged. The Victorians believed that sound could stimulate the nervous system, especially in the hours when the mind was meant to dissolve into dreams. It's ironic, you think, how much noise this pursuit of silence can make. Outside the window, the gaslights burn in ghostly halos. London, or wherever you've decided this imaginary room exists, is blanketed in mist. The world beyond is dim and distant. Everything close is muted. Sleep is a theory, an experiment performed nightly on the body, usually without success. You lie back, again, and adjust the pillow. One of those firm, rectangular things filled with horsehair, supposed to keep your neck in line with your spine. You remember the lecture spine alignment leads to better drainage of cerebrospinal fluid, or so one medical pamphlet insisted, though the science was half-baked and fully smug. Still, you obey, because that's what's expected. And because you'd try anything at this point. Your thoughts drift to famous Victorians who shared your fate. Charles Darwin, for example, famously struggled with insomnia, convinced that his condition stemmed from excessive mental labor. Queen Victoria herself was said to have suffered from poor sleep, especially in widowhood. If royalty and scientists couldn't manage a full night's rest, what hope did you have? There were always options, though doctors real or just vaguely medicinal peddled a parade of bedtime aids. If warm milk failed, there was lettuce water. If lettuce water failed, there was powdered hop sewn into little sachets and tucked under your pillow. And if all else failed, if the quiet, the warmth, the milk, the silence, the darkness still didn't summon sleep, there were powders and syrups and tiny bottles of things that promised rest but offered only stupor. You recall the contents of your nightstand drawer. A small vial, corked and unlabeled, a gift from your doctor. Or maybe from your sister, who reads too much about patent medicine. Just in case, she said, with a mysterious smile. You haven't touched it yet, but you might. You don't want to be like your cousin. She took something similar once, slept for 18 hours. Woke up hallucinating that her wallpaper was reading poetry to her. Victorian medicine was rarely subtle, and it rarely came with instructions. You had to know someone who knew someone or simply had the right constitution to survive the trial and error of pharmaceutical roulette. The candle by your bed has almost burned down. You're not sure if you should blow it out or let it flicker itself to sleep. Some said that watching a candle burn low helped focus the mind, narrowed your thoughts until they mirrored the gentle tapering of the flame. Others said it wasted wax and invited spiritual interference. Hard to know what advice to follow when most of it contradicts itself. Your stomach gurgles, maybe too much milk. Maybe the nutmeg was old. You don't want to wake the nursemaid for something so trivial. But you wonder, again, how many others in your street, your town, your time are also lying awake, eyes open to darkness, waiting for the blessing of unconsciousness. A breeze stirs, faint and accidental, maybe from a poorly sealed window. The curtain flutters like an unseen presence. You're not afraid, just restless. Again, you try a breathing exercise. The one the clergyman mentioned during last week's sermon on rest and repentance. Breathe in through the nose for a count of 4, hold for 7. Breathe out slowly through the mouth for 8. He claimed it mirrored the rhythm of heaven. You think it mostly makes you dizzy. Still, you try. In, hold, out. It's something, not much. But in the rigid order of Victorian nightfall, something is a welcome guest. And if that something is as small as your own breath, your own warm milk-scented breath, then so be it. The clock ticks again, louder than before. Somehow, like it's mocking you, you lie on your back and stare up at the ceiling, the same square of plaster you've stared at for what must be an hour, maybe longer. The candle's burned itself into a crooked little stub, and the shadows it casts twitch like sleeping cats. You try not to move. Moving invites wakefulness. Stillness, remember, is sacred, or so they keep telling you. And yet, the room is anything but still, not in the way your ears measure it. That clock, that blasted clock, a round, oak-faced sentinel with Roman numerals and a pendulum that swings with imperial confidence. It doesn't tick, it announces. Each second lands like a tap from a conductor's baton, reminding, measuring, accusing. It's perched proudly on the mantel across from your bed. You'd throw it in the fireplace if you weren't afraid it might somehow survive the blaze and tick louder in revenge. But for now, it stays. It always stays. Victorian decor wasn't known for subtlety, and every proper bedroom needed a clock, preferably one that could double as a weapon or family heirloom. You're trying to fall asleep in a world that defines peace as the absence of disturbance. Noise, in the Victorian mind, wasn't just unpleasant, it was an offense to the senses, a threat to health. Doctors wrote entire treatises on the dangers of acoustic assault. They didn't call it that, but you know they would have, had they owned a thesaurus. Historians still argue whether these beliefs stemmed more from medical theory or class-based performance. Rich families had the luxury of quiet, soundproofed rooms and servant-enforced silence. The poor, they slept 10 to a room, soot in their hair, dogs barking outside, and the sound of life clattering just beyond the door. But for those with means, the night was a pristine opera of nothingness. You've been told your room is properly insulated. Thick drapes over every window, carpets so plush it drinks sound, upholstered furniture designed not for comfort, but for acoustic dampening. Even the bed has been positioned at the ideal acoustic midpoint between door and fireplace, as determined by Dr. Coventry's 1879 Manual for Nocturnal Equilibrium. A book as unreadable as it is heavy, and yet the clock still ticks. You pull the blanket up under your chin, seeking comfort in wool. Heavy layers were supposed to calm the nerves by pressing the body gently into place, like a hug from someone whose affections are conditional. You're bowling in silence. Your nose is cold, your legs are warm, your brain is somewhere in 1883, composing letters you'll never send. You close your eyes and try to focus on your breathing again, but the tick is always there, like a second heartbeat, like a metronome counting down towards something inevitable. You wonder if time moves slower in these rooms, slowed by the density of velvet curtains and moral obligation. Perhaps you should have requested music. That new contraption, the phonograph, has found its way into some of the more modern parlors. but it's still frowned upon at night, too new, too unpredictable, too full of jazz hands. Even when playing Chopin, your aunt swears by silence. She's a devoted practitioner of the still hour, a routine involving a single candle, 10 minutes of prayer, and a self-denial so intense it could crack porcelain. She once lectured you for sneezing after sundown. Claimed it was the body's rebellion against God's quiet. You don't visit her often. Still, you tried her method tonight. You close your eyes, clear your thoughts, and listen to the nothing. But the nothing isn't empty. It's full of secrets. The distant tick, the flutter of drapes, the memory of a conversation from earlier, looping without permission. You remember the doctor again, his calm assurances that insomnia was an issue of modernity, that the mind, overstimulated by telegrams, gaslight, and novels with too many French characters, simply couldn't rest. He recommended a strict bedtime. No talking, no reading, no excitement. After 7 p.m. he suggested eliminating all forms of stimulation, including sugary fruits, dancing, or excessive optimism. You laughed. He did not. You tried the early bedtime. You even refused your nightly pair. Still, here you are, awake, ticking. You consider the old remedies. To folk ones, sleep under a rosemary sachet. Turn your pillow counterclockwise. Place a silver coin under your tongue. Whisper your sins into a folded handkerchief and place it beneath your mattress. Victorian homes were part hospital, part folklore museum. You tried the rosemary. It made you sneeze. The coin. You nearly choked on it. As for the sins, there weren't enough handkerchiefs in the house. The silence grows heavier. You didn't think that was possible. But it presses against your ears like deep water. You wonder if anyone's ever drowned in stillness. The tick returns. You thought it had stopped. You were wrong. Maybe you could muffle it. A pillow over the mantel clock. No, that would look suspicious. The nursemaid might think you're trying to smother the passage of time itself, and there's no treatment for that. Not yet. You glance at the coals in the fireplace. They glow like watching eyes. You remember stories of people who swore they saw angels in the embers, or ghosts. Or at the very least, something interesting enough to forget the clock. You tried. You stare. A pattern forms a rose. Oh. Star. No. Just heat and soap and your tired imagination trying its best to entertain itself. It's almost funny. Almost. You shift again. That tiny rustle in the bedclothes feels like thunder. You freeze. Listen. Nothing. Go. And then. Tick. And another. Tick. And on it goes. Eventually, and you don't quite know when, your thoughts begin to lose their structure. The room blurs at the edges. The clock ticks. But fainter now, like it's moving farther away. Your limbs grow heavier. Still hot. Still mildly annoyed. But quieter. The weight of the wool. The warmth of the fire. The lull of nothing finally beginning to have their way with you. Sleep is not a dramatic thing. Not in this house. It slips in sideways, unnoticed. It doesn't roar or declare victory. It just moves the clock one tick further into forgetfulness. The bottle is small. Brown glass. Cloudy at the edges, with a curt paper label and a cork that doesn't quite fit. You've stared at it for 15 minutes now, lying perfectly still beneath the blanket, debating whether to uncork it. The doctor said 1 teaspoon, but he also called it soothing syrup, which you know is Victorian for contains opium. Good luck. Still, you're desperate. Lettuce water failed you. Milk didn't help. Silence turned out to be loud in a way that only silence can manage. And that clock, well, you don't want to talk about the clock anymore. So you reach for the bottle. Your fingers fumble a bit. Whether from nerves or cold or hesitation, you're not sure. The cork gives way with a soft pop, and the scent that escapes is unmistakable, sweet, almost sickly. Something between mint and something else earthy. Cloying, oddly pleasant if you're the sort of person who enjoys antique cabinets and the occasional brush with chemical sedation. Victorians swore by this stuff. Laudanum, a tincture of opium and alcohol. It was sold over the counter like cough drops. Writers loved it. Poets depended on it. Mothers gave it to their teething children and pretended not to notice when the house suddenly fell to quiet. It was the potion of choice for all things inconvenient: pain, grief, colic, and yes, sleeplessness. Historians still argue whether it was truly effective or simply the most acceptable form of self-erasure available at the time. Either way, it worked, or at least it stopped you from caring that it didn't. You tip the teaspoon carefully. It's heavier than you expect. One drop lands on your thumb, sticky and amber and already whispering something soft. You sip it. It tastes like overripe spices soaked in regret. But it goes down smooth. Too smooth. You lie back again. The bottle stays open on the nightstand. A silent promise that more relief is within reach, just a tilt away. But you tell yourself only once, you're not your cousin. You won't become dependent. You just want to sleep. One night, 1 teaspoon. Your vision doesn't blur, exactly, but your thoughts lose their edges. That annoying mental sharpness like a drawer full of rattling knives goes quiet. The knives are still there, but they've been laid in velvet. You like that. It's like your brain's wearing slippers now. You wonder, as you always do, who else is doing this exact thing right now. Somewhere across town, another figure sits in another Victorian bedroom, sipping from the same kind of bottle. Maybe hers is labeled Godfrey's Cordial, or Mother Bailey's Quiet Syrup, or Dr. Farrington's Midnight Drops, all of them euphemisms for the same escape hatch. You try not to think about the risks, about addiction, about the number of housewives who drifted too far from reality, lulled into numbness by the thing they were told would fix them. After all, you're not trying to forget anything, you're just tired. You just want rest, and this is medicinal. It doesn't make you drowsy, not in the way you expected. Instead, it draws the edges inward. The room feels closer. The clock still ticks, but from behind a wall. The blanket is heavy, but now it's comforting, not stifling. Your own thoughts begin to soften like paper left in the rain. You remember hearing that some Victorian doctors used laudanum not just for sleep, but as a diagnostic tool. If a patient's insomnia vanished with a few drops, it proved the problem was physical. If the insomnia persisted, it meant the problem was moral, spiritual, or possibly even criminal. Yes, criminal. Some even believed that sleeplessness was a precursor to deviant behavior. Not sleeping, you might be harboring impure thoughts or socialist sympathies. Better sleep, or someone might notice. You wonder how many patients pretended the syrup didn't work, just to avoid admitting how good it felt. Somewhere in your room, something shifts, or maybe it doesn't. The border between real and imagined is blurring. You could swear the wallpaper's pattern is moving, but that might just be the candle light. That candle is down to its last breath, one final sputter and it'll be gone. You should blow it out. You try to lift your hand, but your arm feels like it belongs to someone else now. Not in a frightening way, just inconvenient. You remember the doctor's warning. Never take more than 1 spoonful. And never take it more than 3 nights in a row. And don't make eye contact with mirrors. After taking it, okay, maybe that last part was just something your cousin said. But still, the darkness begins to thicken around the edges. Not frightening, not cold, just dense, like velvet theater curtains being drawn across your vision. You like that image. You imagine a stage, empty, the show finally over. Applause from invisible ghosts, and in that theater of your mind, a small, soft voice, the voice of reason. Maybe, or just common sense, suggests that this cure might not be so different from the disease, but you're already slipping. Not into sleep, not quite, but into the waiting room of sleep. That place where time folds in on itself, where the body feels like a distant echo, and the brain loops old conversations in a soft, underwater tone. Your hand falls to your side. You don't remember putting the teaspoon down, but there it is. Still wet, still glinting in the half-light. You make a mental note to wash it tomorrow, but even that thought floats away like dust motes. In some light, you breathe. In, out, no counting. Just rhythm. You try to think of something comforting, something safe. A garden, a quiet stream, a book with yellowed pages and no plot. But instead, all you see is that little brown bottle, sitting right there, like it knows you'll be back tomorrow night. Maybe you will, or maybe you won't need to. Maybe this night will finally be the one that carries you all the way to morning. The blankets press against you like polite restraint. Not quite oppressive, but certainly not optional. You're cocooned in thick, scratchy wool, layer upon layer, laid down with clinical precision by someone convinced that insulation is the same thing as comfort. The room is cool, or maybe it's warm, But it doesn't matter. You're not allowed to adjust anything. The blankets stay. Victorian wisdom says that heat soothes the nerves and cold invites hysteria, so you swelter in therapeutic stillness. The windows, of course, are shut, locked, even double-paned, if you're lucky or cursed. Heavy velvet curtains have been drawn for hours. The outside world has been smothered in upholstery. This, you're told, is for your benefit. Fresh air is fickle. It carries moisture, and moisture carries disease. Never mind that you feel like you're drowning in your own exhalations. Victorian bedrooms didn't compromise with ventilation. Historians still argue whether the avoidance of fresh air was a misunderstanding of miasma theory or just an aesthetic preference for gloom. Either way, you're stuck in a room that smells like dust, rose water, and quiet desperation. You turn your head slightly. The pillow crunches softly stuffed with horsehair or maybe some ancient form of straw that someone promised was better than feathers. Something about spinal alignment and discouraging sinfully indulgent softness. You try not to think about the fact that your neck feels like it's folded in on itself, like a poorly arranged napkin. There's a window behind those curtains, you know it. You remember it from daylight hours, when the room was an entirely different creature, bright, drafty, and strangely judgmental. But at night, all natural light is banished. You asked once about opening the curtain a little, just to let the moon in. The nursemaid looked at you like you'd suggested inviting Satan to tea. No, she'd said simply. Light and flam as the mine. You're starting to believe her. You roll to your side, or rather, you attempt to. The weight of the blankets makes the move feel ceremonial, slow, deliberate, like turning a ship. Once you're settled on your side, the pillow resists your head like it's offended. You make do. You think about the fireplace, embers dim now. A few stray sparks, a faint orange glow. It was stoked earlier by someone in uniform, a footman, maybe, or a maid with a coal scuttle and a weary expression. You didn't thank them. No one thanks people for heat. They only complain when it's gone. The room hums with silence again, not the gentle kind. The taut, expectant silence of a space that resents your wakefulness. You try not to cough. Your throat itches from the air, thick with whatever invisible particles, unearned names like vapors and tizzic. You stare at the edge of the curtain. It moves, barely, a tremble so faint it might not be real. Is that a breeze, a leak in the airtight seal of velvet and lace? You imagine cool air sneaking in. Imagine the heresy of breathing something new. You've read about the great air debate. Some doctors insisted on open windows, even in winter. Others condemned the idea entirely. One physician, Dr. Plunkett of Derbyshire, claimed that nighttime air contained leaden currents of moral fatigue. No one knew what he meant, but they quoted him often. So the window stayed closed. Your nose itches now. The wool blanket has crept up during the night, inching its way toward suffocation. You push it back slightly, just enough to breathe but not enough to attract judgment from invisible ancestors watching from your picture frames. You think again of air, real air, a breeze, a draft, anything. You wonder what would happen if you got up just briefly and opened the curtain, pulled back the heavy fabric, lifted the latch on the window and let the world in. But you don't, because deep down, you know this isn't really about airflow. It's about control. Sleep, in the Victorian household, was something to be earned through discipline. Comfort was suspicious, ease was sinful, suffering was virtuous. You think about the bed itself, a monstrous thing of carved wood and stern moral character. It doesn't creak, it groans, like it resents your presence. The mattress is firm in the wrong places, and the headboard could probably stop a cavalry charge. It's been in your family for generations. People were probably born in this bed. People probably died in it, too. You wonder if they slept. Well, you shift again. The wool rasps against your nightshirt. You're sweating now, but your feet are freezing. This was considered ideal in many circles. Stimulate the extremities, someone once said. Possibly the same person who invented foot-warming bricks and then forgot to include instructions. You remember your cousin's house. She had an airing bed, a Victorian experiment that looked like a regular bed but had perforated slats and hidden vents, supposed to allow circulation without letting in actual air. It didn't work. She developed bronchitis and blamed her maid. The maid blamed the bed. The bed, presumably, blamed no one. It was already retired to the attic. You blink. The candle's gone out completely now. The wick gave up an hour ago, and the smoke has faded. You're in full darkness, but not silence. There's always that faint sound, the crackle of dying coals. The distant groan of the house settling into its foundations, maybe even a faraway carriage on the street below. It's never truly silent. Just close enough to feel like something's missing. You try to sleep again. You close your eyes, breathe, think quiet thoughts. Like gardens, like fog, like unremarkable Thursday afternoons. But still your brain whispers, too hot, too still, too loud, too quiet, and so you lie there. Wrapped in wool, smothered by velvet, protected from the treacherous gift of air. Longing, just a little, for a breeze that might never come. The problem, they tell you, is your conscience. Or maybe your digestion, or possibly your soul. It's hard to keep track. Every Victorian authority seems to have a different theory about why you're not sleeping. But one thing's clear, it's probably your fault. You stare at the ceiling, that same pale rectangle you've been memorizing for nights now, and you try to remember every decision that brought you here. Was it the second slice of cake? The idle gossip about the neighbor's maid? Or the French novel you borrow and read twice under your blanket with a contraband candle stub? Sleep, in the Victorian mind, wasn't just a biological function. It was a test of character, a nightly measure of your moral hygiene. If you couldn't sleep, it meant you were out of alignment spiritually, physically, or socially. The brain was a vessel for virtue, and a restless brain hinted at vice. You try, of course, you always try. You recited Psalm 4, you performed that breathing exercise. Again inhale, hold, exhale, repent. You even forced yourself to recall the entire list of English monarchs, backwards, to bore yourself into unconsciousness. It didn't work. You still lie there, a human sandwich of guilt, wool, and mounting anxiety. Doctors weren't much help either. They rarely treated sleeplessness directly. Instead, they examined you for signs of nervous excitement, unbalanced temperament, or internal fermentation. In modern terms, this might translate to stress, anxiety, or indigestion, but in 1880, it was seen as something between a personal flaw and a polite sin. Historians still argue whether Victorian medicine genuinely misunderstood the body or just strategically ignored it. After all, a sleepless woman could be diagnosed with hysteria and treated with everything from electric belts to cold baths. A sleepless man, on the other hand, might be praised for his restless intellect. To bed, it seems, judged differently based on who lay in it. You shift beneath the blankets, the pillow has formed a ridge along your neck, and your toes have fallen asleep before the rest of you. You think, not for the first time, that your mattress might be punishing you. A quiet revenge for the time you spilled tonic water on its predecessor. Your mind won't settle, it ticks over the day's regrets like a buzzard with a to-do list. That offhand remark you made at dinner, the letter you haven't answered, the way your brother looked at you when you asked for more sugar in your tea. Everything small, everything silly, suddenly looms large in the dark. You remember reading an article in the Ladies' Monthly Review that warned against excessive self-reflection after sundown. It claimed that post-sunset introspection invites nervous decay. You'd laughed when you read it. You're not laughing now. In the quiet, your thoughts spiral toward darker territory. You think about your aunt, who hasn't left her bedroom in 3 months. The family says she's unwell. You've heard whispers, nerves, melancholy, sleeplessness. Her room is on the 2nd floor, with shutters permanently drawn. Sometimes you imagine her lying there, just like you, watching a ceiling that won't blink back. You hope you're not next. The doctor offered you a journal once. Write your thoughts, he said. Empty the mind. But writing at night was frowned upon. It might stimulate creative regions and keep you awake longer. Everything, apparently, keeps you awake. At this point, even the act of trying to sleep might be too much. You try to think of nothing. Nothingness, they say, is the doorway to rest. That the moment you focus on emptiness, your brain rebels. It fills the void with questions. Did you remember to extinguish the candle properly? Was that creak in the hallway a servant, or something else? Are the coals really dead or just waiting? You sigh, carefully, quietly, to loud, and someone might come check on you, and you'll have to pretend to be asleep again. Your mind circles back to lettuce water. It always does, so innocent, so ridiculous, so incredibly ineffective. Yet somehow less terrifying than the alternatives. You almost miss its bland, vegetal taste. You think about bowling some tomorrow just in case, not because you believe in it, but because the ritual feels safer than laudanum and kinder than moral judgment. You think about virtue again. You were taught that good people sleep well, that the righteous rest with ease. But what about saints with insomnia? Martyrs with migraines? Did they fail the test? 2. You wish someone would ask that question. The bed creaks slightly as you adjust again, pulling one leg free of the covers for a moment of rebellion. The cold air on your shin feels shocking, like you've stepped into a different room. Then you remember the advice from household words. Never expose the lower limbs to sudden temperature change. You sigh again and tuck the leg back under. Victorians had a theory for everything. Not always a good theory, and rarely a consistent one, but always delivered with confidence. They believed your stomach had moral opinions, that your spine held secrets, that your liver could be insulted by bad posture, and above all, that sleeplessness meant your body or soul was out of tune. You breathe slowly, again, not for effect, just because your brain needs something to focus on besides itself. The room is still dark, the clock still ticks, and you try to hold perfectly still, as if sleep will mistake you for ready and settle gently on your chest like a bird. Not yet, but maybe soon. The cup sits in your hands again, porcelain this time, delicate and hairline cracked, filled with something that smells faintly like garden clippings left out in the sun. You try not to grimace. It's lettuce water again. Backed by quiet demand and gentle insistence. You didn't ask for it, but the nursemaid brought it anyway. She knows your schedule better than you do. Lettuce at 9, silence at 10, despair by 11. You take a sip. Tepid, grassy, suspiciously bland. It tastes like the memory of flavor, supposedly. This infusion is calming, soothing to the nerves, cooling to the blood, and, if you're lucky, capable of ferrying you gently into unconsciousness. You know better by now, but you drink it anyway. Lettuce, specifically Lactuca virosa, was all the rage among the more genteel sufferers of insomnia. The white sap it exudes, and cut lactucarium was described as a mild opiate, though modern scholars are still split on whether it ever truly functioned that way. Historians argue whether it was pharmacologically active or simply another case of placebo wrapped in domestic ritual. Still, there's something about the process: boiling water, steeping leaves, pouring carefully into your favorite chipped cup. Even if the brew itself does nothing, the act calms you, makes you feel like you're doing something productive about your sleeplessness. Victorians valued activity, even when it came to rest. You stare at the dark window. The curtains are open tonight, a rare indulgence. You insisted. The nursemaid wasn't thrilled, but she relented. Just for a bit, she said, as if moonlight were an intruder who might slip through the glass and into your circadian rhythm with one silver finger. You're not sure what's worse, being wide awake in total darkness, or being awake and reminded that the world continues without you. Outside, you can see the silhouettes of trees, the glimmer of gaslight on wet cobblestones, the faint glow of a distant window. Someone else is awake. You find that oddly comforting. You take another sip. The lettuce water has cooled further. It now tastes like damp paper towels and lost hope. You finish it anyway, set the cup down, pull the blankets higher. You remember reading somewhere that lettuce is also considered a cooling agent for passions. In ancient times, it was linked to chastity and calmness, possibly because of its sedative effect, or simply because no one ever got excited about lettuce. The Victorians, of course, adopted this symbolism with predictable enthusiasm. A proper woman, it was believed, should have a lettuce-like temperament, modest, quiet, undisturbed. You roll your eyes at yourself in the dark, quietly, modestly, undisturbed. Victorian bedtime was never just about sleep. It was about rehearsal for virtue, for composure, for moral superiority. Each ritual had to be performed with solemn precision. Fluffing the pillow, folding the bed cover just so, sipping something unappealing in measured silence. Even your failures had to be dignified. If you couldn't sleep, you should at least lie there attractively. You shift. The mattress gives a long sigh, like it's exhausted by your restlessness. You can't blame it. You wonder what it would feel like to sleep without trying, without the weight of expectation, without the invisible judgment of doctors, ants, and pamphlets printed on thick, disapproving paper. Just sleep, inert and unconscious, but that's not how it works here. Not in this room, not in this century. Your thoughts drift, and for a moment you imagine an alternate timeline where lettuce actually worked. Where one sip sends you floating, light and painless, into a void of dreams shaped like calm rivers and distant music. You think of yourself walking through a giant, dewy lettuce leaf, cool and green and endlessly boring. You're almost there. Almost, a creak, the hallway again. Maybe the nursemaid checking in, maybe the house settling, maybe your imagination. Either way, the spell breaks. You're back in the room, in the bed, in the body. You pull the blanket tighter and try to refocus. You tell yourself that stillness is victory. That even if you can't sleep, you can pretend. And pretending might eventually fool the body into compliance. You try your cousin's trick counting things you hate. 1. The clock. 2. Boiled milk. 3. Dr. Thompson's silent lectures. 4. The fifth layer of this blanket. 5. The pamphlet titled How to Sleep Without Complaining. 6. The fact that it's working. Just a little. You yawn, a small, unexpected triumph. It feels like progress. It might be a trick, but it's a pleasant one. You lean into it, let your jaw stretch, let your eyes flutter. Let your mind soften like wet paper in warm water. The moon is higher now, casting a pale glow that just brushes the edge of your knitstand. The empty cup looks ceremonial now. A relic of a ritual performed too often. You think about tucking it under your pillow like a tea-stained tooth, trading it for the sleep fairy. The air in the room is cooler now. Or maybe it's just your pulse slowing, your limbs sinking into stillness. You imagine the lettuce finally doing something deep inside you. Not as a drug, but as a suggestion. Let go, drift, wilt into rest. You think of gardens, of damp leaves, of green things growing silently in moonlight. You imagine lying in a field of lettuce, each leaf cradling you gently, the soil warm beneath your back. You can't see the stars, but you know they're there, distant, quiet, indifferent, and for a moment, you stop trying. You just lie there, softly, silently, slightly lettuce-flavored, You shift in the bed and hear a dull clunk. A mechanical sound, somewhere between a click and a complaint. It's the frame your bed, an elaborate contraption of gears and slats, engineered to support better sleep through posture. Or so the pamphlet claimed when it was delivered last spring along with the instructions and several tools no one could identify. The Victorian fascination with mechanical solutions extended, naturally, to the bed itself. Why rely on the inconsistent behavior of the human spine when brass and oak could hold you in place overnight? You glance toward the corner of the room where the sleek chair waits. Another experiment, another failure, but one your doctor swears by. This chair, more accurately, a padded throne with various adjustable knobs, was intended for short preparatory rest periods. The idea was that reclining upright for 20 minutes before bed would align your internal organs, discourage over-dreaming, and make the transition to horizontal repose more civilized. You tried it once. You nearly lost circulation in both legs. Still, the bed has its own gimmicks. Hidden springs designed to tilt the mattress ever so slightly toward the headboard, keeping your lungs elevated and clear, a raised edge on the lower half, meant to prevent nocturnal slippage, even a compartment in the footboard, which supposedly stores heat bricks, but more often traps your feet in the night. Victorian ingenuity. Always ambitious, rarely comforting. You sigh and lie back. Carefully, if you move too suddenly, the headrest clicks and shifts again, as though recalibrating to an invisible formula. You once joked to your maid that it felt like sleeping in a voting machine. She didn't laugh, neither did the bed. The concept of the clockwork bed came from the same minds who invented automatic tea brewers and self-cleaning chamber pots. Brilliant, if occasionally misguided. They believed sleep could be coaxed into being through levers and angles, not feelings or thoughts, as if dreams would respect geometry. Historians still argue whether these contractions were created out of genuine medical interest or simply Victorian boredom paired with too much industrial ambition. Some models included rocking mechanisms, others had wind-up timers that would adjust your position every 90 minutes. One even played a music box tune at sunrise, theoretically waking you with angelic serenity, The reviews were mixed. You once visited a friend in Bath who proudly displayed her newest model, the Somnifram Deluxe. It looked like a grand piano and hissed faintly at night. She claimed it improved her breathing. Her husband claimed it tried to fold him in half during a thunderstorm. Your own bed is slightly less aggressive, but no less opinionated. Tonight, it insists that you lie perfectly straight. Any deviation causes a faint groan from the springs, a reminder that it's watching. You wonder if the bed resents you, if it knows how often. You contemplate abandoning it for the floor. You think briefly about that idea, the floor, cold, but uncomplicated. No mechanisms, no philosophy, just will and gravity. You almost do it, almost. Instead, you rise softly, reluctantly and walk to the sleep chair. It's as uncomfortable as you remember, stiff, yet somehow sagging in all the wrong places. The headrest is a padded cylinder that presses against your neck like a judgmental knuckle. The armrests are at uneven heights. The footrest only extends if you crank a small lever with a nose that could wake the entire household. But you sit, you give it a chance. You lean back, try to relax, try to believe. Victorian doctors insisted that posture directly affected sleep. Sit like a lady, lie like a corpse, wake like a queen, or something like that. You remember reading that an upright spine encouraged the descending of consciousness from the brain to the chest. That phrase made you laugh, until you remembered how seriously the author took it. Some of these ideas came from phrenologists, who believed the shape of your skull and the angle of your head dictated not only your thoughts, but your capacity for dreams. One pamphlet suggested sleeping with your head angled precisely 13 degrees toward the northeast. It claimed to encourage piety and discourage mental agitation. You tried it once. You dreamt about taxes, the chair creaks under your weight. Not loud, but just enough to remind you of its presence. You sit, motionless, staring at the fireplace. The embers are low again. A faint orange pulse, like the room's slow heartbeat. You try to close your eyes, to imagine this strange position leading somewhere peaceful. But instead, your legs start to tingle. Your neck feels exposed, and your arms keep sliding off the lopsided rests. You begin to suspect that this chair's true purpose is not to induce sleep but to punish the idea of comfort itself. You return to the bed, not defeated, exactly, just reminded. You settle back under the blankets. The mattress accepts you, more or less. The springs don't click, the pillow surrenders slightly. And the mechanisms, those carefully calibrated levers and silent hinges, remain mercifully still. You wonder again how many Victorians spent their nights in rooms like this, surrounded by gadgets and guidance, theories and therapies, all promising sleep as if it were something you could purchase or invent. You imagine them adjusting knobs, angling pillows, lighting special candles, all in pursuit of unconsciousness that never quite arrive. You think about all the energy being expended in service of stillness, all the movement designed to create rest, all the noise made in the name of silence. And you close your eyes, just for a moment, just long enough to imagine sleep coming not as a reward, not as an achievement but as a pause in the mechanical whirring of everything around you. The bottle clinks gently against the glass as you pour yourself a nightcap, just a small one, because you're not trying to lose consciousness, only borrow a little forgetfulness. You swirl the liquid, watch it coat the inside of the glass like molasses, and remind yourself that this is medicinal. It's always medicinal. It doesn't matter if it's brandy, beer, or a tincture of valerian root. If you drink it in silence and in a dressing gown, it counts as treatment. The Victorians swore by the nightcap, not the embroidered, pointy kind, though those existed, too, but the drink. A gentle, warming final ritual to coax the nerves into submission. Brandy was the classic chose, a small dirham before bed to settle the stomach and hush the mind. Some swore by stout beer, heavy and soporific. Others preferred sherry, sweet and civilized. And for those with more delicate constitutions or less access to alcohol, there was always valerian root, steeped into something that smelled like old boots. And regret, you go with the brandy tonight. It burns a little going down, but the warmth that follows is strangely reassuring. You feel it spread through your chest like a soft hush, a domestic fire curling up inside you. It doesn't put you to sleep, not really, but it pushes the nose back a few feet. And sometimes, that's enough. Still, The debate raged in drawing rooms and doctors' offices alike. Was the nightcap a remedy or a crutch? Did alcohol calm the nerves or inflame them? Historians still argue whether the rise in bedtime drinking during the 19th century marked a cultural embrace of leisure or a collective coping mechanism for lives measured in emotional repression. You take another sip, just a small one. The bottle is already half empty, but you're not keeping track. You tell yourself this is normal, everyone does it. You remember the newspaper clippings, the quiet winks from older relatives, the offhand remarks at dinner. He sleeps well enough, with a bit of gin. She's always liked her port before prayers. No one called it addiction. They called it ritual. And then, of course, there were the herbal options. For those who avoid alcohol either out of conviction or cost, there were dozens of alternatives. Valerian root, hops, chamomile, lavender, each sold in little brown packages with handwritten labels and heavy promises. You tried them all. Valerian was the worst. You remember that one in particular. It came highly recommended in Mrs. Bramble's Guide to Temperate Living. You brewed it as instructed, 1 teaspoon steeped for 3 minutes. No sugar, no honey. It tasted like boiled earth. You choked it down anyway. You didn't sleep, but you did have very vivid dreams about screaming hedgerows. Hops were better stuffed into a sachet and tucked under your pillow. The scent was sharp, almost spicy, and the effect was more placebo than pharmaceutical. But that's half the battle, isn't it? Making the brain believe it's safe to sleep. You sip. Again. The brandy's doing its job. You feel your thoughts slowing, not stopping, but stretching. The tight loops of worrying begin to uncoil into softer shakes. Not quite dreams, just looser, lazier versions of the same tired thoughts. You lie back and close your eyes, and then your stomach growls, loudly. It's the brandy. Probably. Or maybe dinner wasn't as substantial as you remember. Either way, the sensation is unmistakable. You're comfortably sleepy and inconveniently hungry. A classic Victorian problem. The advice books had plenty to say on this. Some recommended dry toast with nut butter. Others swore by a slice of cold beef protein for the blood, and blood for the brain. You're not getting up, though. You'd have to light a candle. Wake someone, find the pantry key. It's too much. So you lie still, hungry, warm, slightly drunk. Hoping the body will choose sleep over supper, your thoughts wander again. You think of the caricatures in Punch magazine, those exaggerated drawings of upper-class insomniacs clutching brandy bottles and ranting at startled butlers. You wonder how much truth hid behind the satire, probably more than anyone admitted. You once heard a story, probably apocryphal, about a man who drank a shot of whiskey every night before bed for 40 years. He died peacefully in his sleep. They say he had no teeth, no money, and no regrets. You're not sure whether to envy him or feel sorry. The brandy has dulled your edges now. The pillow no longer feels like a rock. The mattress's stubborn angles have softened. Even the blanket, once overbearing, now presses down with a kind of affection. Still, there's that little voice, the one that pipes up when the house is quiet and the lights are low. The one that asks, is this a solution or a habit? You ignore it. Tonight is not a night for reflection. Tonight is for managing, for coping, for sleep, however it arrives. You close your eyes again. You try not to think. You fail. But this time, the thoughts come slower, thicker, like syrup sliding off a spoon. They're not sharp anymore, not dangerous. Just fuzzy little impressions of earlier conversations and half-remembered errands. You begin to drift, the kind of drift that feels like stepping into warm water. Just before you let go entirely, you remember something. You didn't cork the bottle. It's still open on the nightstand. A small thing, but you don't move. The night will take care of it. For now, you're here, warm, heavy, half full, and ready, half full. The room is quieter than usual tonight. Not because anything has changed, but because you've given in. You've stopped straining to hear. The quiet no longer feels like something to manage, or judge, or outwit. It just is, still, heavy, and strangely loud in its own right. This, they say, is the silence cure. You've read about it, maybe even tried to believe in it. The idea was simple enough. Music excites the nerves, silence soothes them. Sleep would come if all stimuli were removed: light, sound, movement, anything that might remind your body that the world still existed. You lie back, stiff as a museum piece. The silence curls around you like an old cat, aloof, impassive, content to just sit there and exist without explanation. Your room has been designed for this very purpose. Thick carpets underfoot, upholstered furniture to absorb echo, windows double shutter, curtains so dense they could block a cannon blast. The door doesn't creak, the floor doesn't groan, even the fire has been reduced to its lowest, quietest embers. There's no music, no voices, not even birdsong. Just the faint buzz in your own ears and the occasional rustle of wool. And of course the clock, still ticking, always ticking. The silence cure wasn't just a preference in Victorian sleep hygiene. It was a full-blown medical doctrine in some circles. Silence, according to Dr. James Broughton's treatise on nervous exhaustion, a thrilling read, if you hate thrill, was a tonic in itself. Noise, he argued, shattered the delicate filaments of the mind. His prescription, total oral abstinence after sundown. Historians still argue whether this belief was rooted in science or a broader social obsession with order. Probably both. After all, the Victorian household prized control above comfort. And silence, in that context, wasn't just peaceful, it was proof that everything and everyone was properly contained. You think about the rules: no talking after 9. No walking in shoes past 10. Servants instructed to pad their movements, children trained to whisper. One friend swore that her uncle replaced the household cat with a quieter brie after a particularly disruptive yowl. The new cat was mute. The family considered it a miracle. You've had visitors who couldn't bear the silence. A cousin from the north came to stay once, and within an hour of nightfall, she'd lit 3 candles, cracked a window, and started humming hymns. You still remember the scandal it caused. She didn't stay long. The silence, you were told, had rejected her. You roll onto your side, carefully. The bed springs do not protest, that's part of the design. You were told when the frame was installed that it had stealth engineering, a phrase that sounds impressive until you realize it means extra padding and more money. Still, the silence holds. You try to focus on it, not as an absence, but as a substance. Something tangible, something present. That's what the silence cure requires, a reimagining of nothingness as therapy. You tell yourself that silence is doing its work, that every minute without disruption is another brick in the wall of sleep, and yet, your mind still chatters. It doesn't shout anymore, but it whispers. A trickle of unfinished sentences and unresolved tasks. The grocery list, the letter you should answer, the image of someone's disappointed eyebrows. Nothing dramatic, just a soft static that refuses to quit. You wonder what true silence feels like, not the quiet room in a big house kind, but the full, absolute silence of a forgotten chapel or an underground cave. Would that work? Would that hush your brain? Or would it just make the noise inside you louder? Some Victorians took the silence cure to its logical extreme. They built soundproof sleeping chambers, lined the walls with cork, removed ticking clocks, and even whispered prayers. One eccentric in Somerset had an entire bed suspended by chains from the ceiling so it wouldn't creak on floorboards. He called it the cloud. He died with perfect posture and unresolved debts. You try to imagine sleeping in a room with zero sound, no ticking, no embers, no breathing. Would it feel like floating or falling? You're not sure. You want to know. You reach for your glass of water and stop halfway. Even the thought of the clink against your nightstand feels intrusive. So you leave it. Sleep, they say, is shy. You don't want to startle it. You lie still. Breathe slowly. Inhale, exhale. The silence shifts. Not in volume, there's nothing to shift, but in texture. It begins to feel heavier, thicker, like you could scoop it up in your hands. Like it's pooling in the corners of the room, wrapping itself around the bedposts and curling over your toes. You close your eyes and picture its silence, not as a void, but as a presence. A pale mist, softly glowing, curling inward, pressing gently on your ears until even your thoughts hush out of courtesy. You let yourself believe, for just a moment, that this is working, that silence is the answer, that nothing, done properly, can fix everything. The curtains are drawn, heavy as guilt and twice as thick. No light enters your room, not starlight, not moonlight, certainly not the scandalous brilliance of morning sun. You've spent the night under a smothering velvet sky. And now, with dawn on the horizon, you lie awake in total darkness, resisting the natural world like a good Victorian should. Sunlight, they told you, was dangerous. It's not that they hated the sun, well, not officially. It had its uses, vitamin D, though they didn't call it that, the occasional jaunt in a walled garden. But during sleep, absolutely not. Direct light was thought to irritate the nerves, agitate the blood, and overexcite the already frail Victorian brain. Morning sun in the bedroom was not a gentle wake-up call. It was a health hazard, and so, the curtains stay shut. Your windows are covered by multiple layers, sheer muslin first, then embroidered panels, then the true gatekeepers, heavy velvet blackout drapes in a hue you're pretty sure is called melancholy wine. They hang from ceiling to floor like a theater curtain awaiting a tragedy. You once tried to open them slightly just to let a bit of breeze in and were met with a gasp so sharp from your maid that you feared she inhaled the wallpaper. Historians still argue whether this obsession with light control stemmed from health fears or deeper cultural discomfort with nature itself. The Victorians trusted engineering over instinct. Why wake to the sun when you could time your body with a mechanical alarm? Why rise when your body said it was time, when you could consult a physician, a pamphlet, and 3 prayer books to make sure? You think of your cousin again, the one with the attic bedroom and the pale skin of a botanical specimen. She hasn't seen daylight since Lent. She claims the shadows make her feel calm, like she's not expected to do anything. She might be onto something, but as you lie here in this perfectly curated dark, you start to wonder what's outside. Not in the poetic sense what's out there in the world, but literally. Is it raining? Is the sky pink with sunrise? Is the neighbor's cat up on the windowsill again, knocking over flower pots like a spiteful ballerina? You have no idea, and that ignorance is by design. One book, The Science of Sleep in Domestic Life, recommends that all windows be covered in at least 3 layers, one for light, one for sound, and one for the wandering eye of the unquiet soul. You're still not sure what that last one means, but you're fairly certain you're the soul in question. The idea was simple. Your bedroom was not just a place of rest, it was a moral fortress. What entered it, what touched you as you slept, could shape your thoughts, your behavior, your very character. Sunlight was too unpredictable. It shifted, it revealed things, it couldn't be trusted. You shift in the bed and reach toward the curtain core. You don't pull it, just wrap your fingers around it, feel its texture, consider its power. Just one tug and you could flood the room with pale gold. You could see the truth of your surroundings, the dust on the mantel, the lopsided lamp, the forgotten book under the chair, but you don't pull, not yet. Instead, you remember what your doctor told you. Sleep is best when uninterrupted by nature's whims. He said it like nature was a nosy relative who might let herself in with a spare key and talk about your posture. So the room remains dark. You try to conjure the outside world in your mind. It's probably foggy. Maybe the street lamp is still on. Maybe the butcher's boy is already running his errands, whistling a tune he's not supposed to whistle before noon. Maybe everything is moving on without you. Or maybe not. Maybe everyone else is still asleep. Maybe this silence belongs to them, too. And maybe, just maybe, you're not the only one lying in a room so dark it feels like velvet turned into air. You close your eyes again, which feels redundant. There's nothing to block out. You could stare for hours and never find the edge of anything. No shapes, no lines, just soft, engulfing black. At first, it unnerves you. Then it begins to soothe. Like being inside a sleep mask warmed by a particularly stern librarian. You breathe. The air is still, slightly stale. The window hasn't been opened in days, maybe weeks. You imagine cracking it just a little, enough to feel the chill, to taste the morning. But then you remember the warnings. Chills lead to fever, fresh air invites spirits. And drafts were practically criminal. So you lie still, you obey. Because this is how sleep is supposed to work. Shut out the world. Shut down the senses, retreat. Eventually, they say, sleep will follow, but you're not so sure anymore. You're starting to think that perhaps, just perhaps, the sun had it right all along. You try not to wheeze too obviously. The nursemaid has been known to reappear at the first hint of pulmonary enthusiasm. Instead, you attempt something refined, controlled breathing, As suggested in one of those slim, stern volumes on rational slumber, you're halfway into your fifth slow inhale when you begin to wonder whether you're calming your nerves or simply oxygenating yourself into hysteria. Victorians believed strongly in the power of breath, not just any breathing, certainly not the involuntary, fluster gasping you're currently engaged in, but the kind prescribed by manuals with titles like The Air Within, A Christian's Guide to Restful Respiration, or How to Breathe Without Sinning. There were dozens of techniques, each more serious than the last, all claiming to bridge the gap between consciousness and rest. One popular approach involved inhaling through the left nostril, holding for a count of 7, and exhaling through pursed lips like you were delicately blowing on a sleeping infant's forehead. Another advised synchronized breath holding with the ticking of a clock. You tried that once, nearly passed out. And yet here you are, once again summoning the ghosts of these techniques in the deep black quiet of your bedroom, hoping that maybe, just maybe this time, your lungs will do what your brain can't. You inhale, hold, exhale. It feels more performative than restful. Your chest rises and falls like a stage curtain, and you imagine a small, judgmental audience of Victorian physicians taking notes on your technique. One clears his throat, another writes, "Too shallow." Possibly female. Historians still argue whether the obsession with breathing exercises was a genuine medical discovery or just another way to keep the middle class occupied. After all, what could be more proper than conquering sleep through virtue and breath alone? One pamphlet even linked poor breathing posture to dreams of an improper nature, which raises the question: what exactly was the improper part, the posture, the dream, or the fact that you dared to inhale in your own bed without divine permission? You attempt a more relaxed method: diaphragmatic breathing. Inhale deep into your belly. Let your stomach rise, then slowly release. This one, you remember, was popular among both nurses and actors, because nothing says peaceful night like borrowing techniques from the theater and the infirmary. The room around you remains still. No wind, no voices, just your breath and the occasional creak of the house settling. You imagine the house, too, breathing in and out, stretching its wooden bones, tensing and releasing, same as you. You begin to notice something strange. Your awareness is narrowing. Not in a dramatic, spiritual sense, just a gentle shrinking of thought. The mind, instead of careening between worries, begins to focus solely on the rhythm. In, out, like a lullaby played on a bellows. For a moment, you think it might be working, then your nose whistles, softly, embarrassingly, not enough to wake the dead, but certainly enough to make you question your own dignity. You pinch your nostrils and exhale sharply. The sound vanishes, your focus breaks, back to the beginning. You sit up slightly, fluff your pillow with the care of a Victorian botanist examining a rare orchid, and settle again. The candle has burned out entirely now, and the air in the room smells of melted wax and linen starch. Your blanket has twisted itself into a soft noose around your ankles, and your nightshirt is bunched somewhere under your ribs. But you dare not shift too much. That would be admitting defeat. Instead, you return to your breathing, but now with mild resentment, as if the very act of drawing breath were an admission that you're still awake. You remember your uncle, who claimed to sleep perfectly every night by simply counting his breaths. He said he never made it past 30. You always suspected he was lying. You tried it once and got to 112 before you started composing grocery lists in your head. Still, you try again. 1. Inhale. 2. Exhale. 3. Inhale. 4. Regret. You lose count at 8. Or maybe 11. The numbers don't matter. The rhythm does, and even as the thoughts keep returning softly, insistently, you begin to feel your body unwinding. Not entirely, but enough. Enough that your limbs don't buzz. Enough that your eyes stop twitching behind closed lids. Enough that your brain, though still stubborn, starts to murmur instead of shout. You think about wind, not wine from outside. God forbid someone crack a window, but the idea of it. Air moving across a hill, through reeds, over water. Something natural, thoughtless, sleepy. You try to match your breath to that imagined breeze. A breath that doesn't do anything, that simply is. For the first time in hours, maybe days, you don't feel like you're breathing at something. Not at sleep, not at guilt, not at failure, just breathing, and for a moment, that's enough. You let the silence press down on you like a soft lid. You let your chest rise and fall without counting. You stop trying. And in that tiny pause between trying and surrender, sleep edges just a little closer. You hold the sock in one hand, the needle in the other. The light from the fire is low, but steady, casting golden reflections on the polished tips. You don't particularly enjoy darning, but it's what the doctor suggested, a quiet, repetitive task to soothe the nerves before sleep. So here you are, hunched under a shawl, ice heavy, fingers pricked more times than you cared to admit, sewing calm into wool. This is not a chore. It is therapy, at least, that's what the household companion for nervous ladies insisted in its lengthy chapter on the gentle occupations of pre-slumber. Darning, embroidery, the arrangement of dried flowers, anything that combines stillness with soft purpose. You tried flower arranging once, the petals made you sneeze. So now it's socks, the rhythm is familiar. Needle in, loop around, pull tight, tiny stitches forming tiny rows like sleepy footprints. There's something satisfying about it. In a mildly masochistic way, you feel like a Victorian monk, stitching away your sins with every pass through the fabric. You once read that Queen Victoria herself kept her hands busy before bed, usually with crochet or letter writing, though it said she occasionally trimmed photographs into decorative shapes. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine coping mechanism or simply a royal attempt to avoid spending too much time with Prince Albert's opinions on ventilation. Regardless, the idea caught on. Dozens of advice columns and doctors' notes emphasized domestic distraction as a remedy for insomnia. Keep the hands moving, they said. Let the body grow tired through quiet, controlled labor. Do not read. Do not pace. Do not write in your diary about your fears of death or your suspicions about the milkmaid. Just sew, just stitch. You pause to examine your work. The sock is lumpy now, but at least the hole is gone. You're not sure whether it will be comfortable to wear or feel like a cobblestone in your shoe. But it doesn't matter. This is for the soul, not the soul. Another stitch, another side. The fire crackles gently beside you. The clock continues its solemn tick from the mantel, but you've made peace with it for now. In the quiet, you begin to drift, not into sleep, but into a foggy, stitch-sized trance. The kind of half-mind that arises when your hands know the way and your thoughts can finally go quiet for a bit. You wonder if the sock will outlive you. That thought comes uninvited, but not unwelcome. You think of your mother's sewing basket, still in the attic. You remember your grandmother's embroidered handkerchiefs, each one stitched with her initials and a level of precision that bordered on madness. Their hands lived on in thread. Maybe yours will, too. It's oddly comforting, this idea of continuity through cloth. Perhaps the Victorians weren't entirely misguided. Perhaps there really is something medicinal about darning. Something humble and unthreatening. A way of saying, I may not sleep tonight, but I can fix this tiny hole in the world. You glance at the pile beside you. 3 more socks, 2 gloves. 1 mystery item that may have once been a bonnet. You won't get through them all tonight, but that was never the point. You're not here to finish, you're here to fade. And it's working, a little. The room feels softer now, less rigid, less expectant. Your hands still move, but more slowly. Your shoulders slump. Your eyes begin to blur the stitches. You pierce the wool by accident and mutter something that's technically swear but sounds more like a hiccup. You set the sock down. You don't remember making that decision. One moment it's in your lap, the next it's on the table, folded with the quiet reverence of something that mattered more than it should have. Your fingers still twitch, wanting something to hold, but you hush them. You've done enough. You rise gently, carefully, and return to the bed. It creaks in greeting, a sound that used to annoy you but now feels almost companionable. You lie back, you breathe. The smell of wool and scorched thread clings to your nightshirt. It's not unpleasant. You think again about the philosophy behind all of this. That sleep could be earned, coaxed, sewn into existence through small acts of patience. That rest, like virtue, came not through indulgence but through quiet industry. You try not to roll your eyes, but you're alone, so you let them roll freely. Still, it helped. You feel calmer. You feel the stitchwork in your hands like a fading echo muscle memory tapering into stillness. You stare at the ceiling. You blink. You don't fall asleep, not yet. But you do stop moving. And that's a start. And You feel it before you see it, that subtle, fizzing hum across your temples, like the ghost of a headache. Like static before a storm, you know the sensation. It means someone has strapped the electrodes on again. Electrotherapy, they called it. A bold innovation, a marvel of modern science. A buzz in your skull that's supposed to rearrange your nervous currents. You have your doubts. Tonight, it's a small device hardly bigger than a book with wires trailing from its sides like sleepy vines. The electrodes rest just above your ears, held in place by an elastic strap that smells faintly of vinegar and burned wool. It's not painful, exactly, just unsettling. Like being quietly judged by a doorknob. Victorian sleep clinics, yes. There were entire clinics devoted to the elusive business of unconsciousness loved this sort of thing. Electric sleep inducers were all the rage by the 1880s, promising results with names like the somniferous coal and Dr. Watt's nocturnal harmonizer. Some even came with testimonials printed in delicate cursive, cured my nerves in a fortnight. No longer afraid of my piano, or simply blessed silence, you flick the tiny switch. The hum intensifies, just slightly, like a curious insect crawling through your skull. It doesn't hurt, but it doesn't feel natural either. And of course, you're not supposed to notice it at all. The doctor insisted that true results occur below perception, which is a clever way of saying, if it doesn't work, it's because you noticed. Historians still argue whether these early electro-sleep devices had any measurable effect, or if they were simply expensive hats that made your hair smell like lightning. Some claim the mild current did, in fact, trigger relaxation in the overstimulated Victorian brain. Others argue it just gave people something hopeful to fuss with. You lie back with the machine buzzing faintly in the background, trying to pretend this is relaxing. The wires tug slightly. When you turn your head, you feel like a laboratory rat with better manners. You remember your cousin, yes, the same one who swore off daylight once tried a version of this called the sleep crown. It was a brass circlet she wore like a tiara, humming faintly as it pulsed gentle shocks into her frontal lobe. She said it worked. She also thought her footstool was spying on her by week 3. So, the jury's out. You try to focus on the feeling, not the device itself, but your body's reaction. Are your fingers tingling? No. Are your eyelids heavy? Maybe. Is that a yawn forming, or just a jaw spasm? Impossible to tell. The electric current makes your thoughts feel thicker, not slower, just stickier, like they're moving through syrup. You try to picture something calming, a field, a warm bath, a painting of a field while in a warm bath. But the image keeps glitching, like a stuttering dream. Still, you don't hate it. There's something about being strapped to a machine that makes the experience feel less personal, less like a failure and more like a treatment. If you don't sleep tonight, it's not your fault, it's the dial settings. You close your eyes and pretend it's working. Inhale, hum, exhale, hum. Your mind begins to wander. Not drift wander, like it's lost in an antique shop with too many mirrors. You see flashes of memories that don't belong to you. Velvet fainting couches, a jar labeled sleep dust, someone in a smoking jacket whispering to a plant. You don't know if this is the machine's doing, or just what happens when your brain gets bored enough. The room is quiet, save for the faint sizzle of wires. The fire has gone cold. The blanket has twisted itself again. Your hands lie palms up, like you're waiting to be diagnosed. You shift, careful not to dislodge the electrodes. You've done that before, felt the zap that came with a sudden disconnection. Like being corrected by an invisible teacher. You wonder how many people tried this and never told anyone. How many sleepless souls wired themselves to gadgets night after night, hoping that one day it would just click. That sleep would descend like a velvet curtain and finally end the performance. One article you read, from the London Review of Nervous Devices, claimed that electricity aligned the mind with the pure magnetic rhythm of the earth. You're not sure what that means. You doubt the author did either. You think about removing the electrodes. Just for a moment, just to see what happens, but instead, you lie still. You let the machine do what it came to do. Whether that's soothing your brainwaves, or just giving you something else to blame tomorrow morning. The hum softens, or maybe you're tuning it out. Either way, your thoughts begin to flatten. No longer sharp or circular, just why, like fog on a frozen field. The machine doesn't promise dreams. Only the absence of resistance, and right now, that's enough. You stare at the ceiling, again, the same spot where a faint crack branches out like a sleepy river. You've traced it with your eyes more times than you can count, watching it meander across the plaster like some secret message. Tonight, it offers no answers. What it does offer, however, is a reminder. You are still very much awake, and that's a problem. Because in the Victorian imagination, sleeplessness wasn't just unfortunate, it was suspicious. It wasn't merely inconvenient, it was revealing. You weren't resting, then perhaps you had something to hide. A guilty conscience, a fevered mind, an overactive imagination, a hidden flaw of character. Your body might have been still, but your soul, apparently, was pacing. Doctors said it plainly. Sleeplessness is often the first sign of mental disintegration. That's a phrase that stays with you, like a thread you can't help tugging. It echoes in the dark. You don't feel mad. Not in the dramatic, raving sense, but there's a fuzziness to your thoughts now, a strange buoyancy to the hours. You've lost track of how long you've been lying here, whether it's early morning or very late night. The air feels thick, the clock has become meaningless. All your usual markers have dissolved. You try to remember your doctor's last warning. When sleeplessness persists, we must consider the psychological cause. He had a fondness for that word psychological. Said it with the pride of someone who just learned how to spell it. Historians still argue whether Victorian diagnoses of madness were driven more by medical theory or social discomfort. It was easier to label someone unstable than to admit that the world itself might be exhausting. Easier to prescribe seclusion than acknowledge systemic unhappiness. Women were, of course, the primary victims of this logic: nervous exhaustion, female hysteria. Uterine insomnia, which, incredibly, was a real phrase once used to suggest that the womb was preventing rest. Men were overworked, women were unbalanced, and both were prescribed variations on the same thing: isolation, tonics, and rest. But only if you do it correctly. You think about the stories of patients sent to seaside retreats, not for relaxation, but for surveillance. Told to lie in bed for 18 hours a day. Forbidden to read, forbidden to write, sometimes forbidden to speak. Because talking might stir the nerves, and nerves, of course, were the root of all trouble. You pull the blanket higher, suddenly chilled by your own thoughts. You're not ill, you're just tired. You tell yourself this, as if repetition will make it true. Your room, once a sanctuary, now feels like it's watching you. The wallpaper with its dense floral pattern seems too deliberate, too arranged. The candle stub on the knitstand has collapsed inward, its melted wax forming a perfect crater. You can hear the faint rattle of a window pane though the windows are closed. You're certain of that. This is the worst part of insomnia. The moment where your brain begins to eat its own tail. When nothing has changed, but everything feels wrong. The shadows grow taller, the silence grows sharper. The air grows heavier. You think again of your aunt, the one with the condition. No one ever named it, of course. Just whispered about her walks at night, her tendency to hum when no music played, her habit of staring at nothing during dinner. She never slept, your mother said once, her voice thick with judgment and something else dear. Maybe. You wonder if your aunt also counted the cracks on the ceiling. If she tried to breathe her way into sanity. If she ever told anyone what she saw in the wallpaper. You sit up, briefly, just to prove you still can. Your limbs feel sluggish. Your head is full of cotton and echoes. You reach for your water, sipped, and feel nothing. Not relief, not clarity, just the mechanics of doing something, action for its own sake. You return to lying down, body heavy, thoughts twitching like insects in a jar. You remind yourself that this happens. People don't sleep sometimes. It doesn't mean anything, you're not falling apart. But you also remember reading that prolonged insomnia in the Victorian era was sometimes considered incipient melancholia. That's how they phrased it, not depression, not anxiety, just a slow slide into emotional fog. You shift again, this time slower. Let the pillow take your weight, let the blanket smooth out. Try not to look at the wallpaper too closely. You take a deep breath, just one, just enough to anchor yourself. The room is quiet, still. You close your eyes, you open them again. You lie in the space between sleep and not sleep, where the body rests but the mind taps gently against the glass. And you whisper to yourself, not aloud, Just inwardly, I am not going mad, I am only tired. You repeat it, again, until the sentence loses shape and becomes a lullaby of its own. You chew slowly, deliberately, as though each bite might convince your body of something it hasn't yet agreed to. It's a lettuce sandwich. The bread is thin, slightly dry. The butter tastes faintly of the icebox, and the lettuce gold, flaccid, unimpressed with its roll crackles once, then collapses like a bored debutante. This is what they've given you tonight, a sleep meal. You're not sure whether to be grateful or vaguely insulted. It's midnight, you're wide awake, and someone has decided that the best way to sedate your nervous system is a tea tray with 3 triangles of buttered bread and a vegetable best known for sitting politely next to more interesting things. Victorians loved a good medicinal snack. The line between foo and remedy was not so much blurry as intentionally ignored. Milk with nutmeg, medicine. A spoonful of brandy in beef broth, medicine. Steamed lettuce between slices of white bread. You guessed it, therapeutic. It calmed the digestion, cooled the blood, soothed the liver. The lettuce sandwich was the edible lullaby of the morally anxious. You swallow and wipe your fingers on the napkin, starched and embroidered with your initials because heaven forbid one cure your insomnia in a manner unbefitting your station. This one, you've been told, is the calming supper, designed to settle the stomach and anchor the soul. If it were up to you, it would include cheese. But dairy at night, they warned, could excite the brain, which seems unfair, considering what cheese has done for society. Historians still argue whether these bedtime foods actually worked or were simply vehicles for routine, ritual, repetition, the same movements, the same flavors, night after night, giving the body something familiar to hang on to while the mind flailed quietly in the dark. And you are flailing, though no one can tell. You chew. You think, you chew again. And as you do, your thoughts drift to those who didn't fare as well, the ones for whom insomnia wasn't a nuisance but a diagnosis, a problem to be solved. A condition to be managed by others, often behind locked doors. The Victorian asylum was never far from a sleepless mind. It hovered, unspoken, a threat wrapped in soft words like rest home, nervous sanatorium, or the always vague place of recovery. What started as a few bad nights could turn into weeks, then months, then an intervention. You think of the stories of women who paced too long and talked too much, of men who couldn't hold a job because they kept strange hours, of the beau down the street who was taken away after claiming he hadn't slept in 8 days and had begun to see time walking like a person. You do not see time, not yet, just shadows and sandwiches. Still, the line feels thinner tonight. You sip water. Not from the glass too loud but from the little porcelain cup provided for such delicate hours. No one talks about how much of insomnia is just not waking anyone else. You could scream, and the house would hear it, but you chew your lettuce sandwich instead. Some believed that food at bedtime grounded the body, that the act of digestion slowed the pulse and anchored the drifting mind. Others believed that eating late was self-indulgent, a failure of discipline. Doctors disagreed. Doctors always disagree. You place the last triangle back on the plate. You won't finish it, partly because you're full, mostly because you feel like the sandwich has begun to judge you. You return to bed. The sheets are cooler now. The pillow has lost its shape, but you reshape it. One palm under, one gentle press, a nightly ritual. You lie back, full of lettuce and doubts. The silence resumes. You think about writing it down, making a note of how you feel, the sandwich, the taste, the fear. But writing at night, they said, stimulates the imagination. So you don't, you just remember. You think about how fragile this all feels. How quickly one night of poor sleep becomes a pattern. How patterns become habits. How habits become reputations. Your reputation is still intact. For now, you don't want to be sent away. You don't want the nursemaid to speak in lowered tones. You don't want the doctor to start mentioning longer-term options. You don't want a padded room where the light never changes and everyone walks like they're afraid of their own footsteps. So you eat the sandwich, you follow the routine. You lie very, very still. You tell yourself, this is normal. Everyone struggles sometimes. Lettuce is fine. And then, just as your thoughts begin to loop again, something surprising happens. Your body sighs, not dramatically, just Let's go a little. Your feet sink into the mattress. Your hands unclench. Your jaw softens. You don't sleep, but you almost could. And in this house, on this night, with these curtains and that clock and that ridiculous sandwich, almost as a kind of triumph. You sit up slightly in bed and glance at the clock. The hour is late, or early depending on how you choose to measure your failures, and yet you are alert. Not because of excitement or fear or even restlessness. No, you're awake because the schedule demands it. Yes, the schedule, you didn't devise it. That came from a doctor or a nursemaid, or perhaps an aging aunt with a fondness for clipboards and contempt, but you follow it religiously. Because in the Victorian mind, sleep is not something that happens, it's something that must be earned through structure. No reading in bed, no stimulating conversation after supper, no warm baths past 8, no naps, ever. Bed must be approached like a chapel, reverently, with clean hands and no expectations, and so, you follow the order. You extinguish the fire precisely at 9:30, you perform 3 minutes of shoulder rolling. You recited a psalm, you plumped your pillow but not aggressively. And now you lie here, like an obedient slab of potential slumber, waiting for the divine gift of unconsciousness that never arrives. Discipline, they said, was the key. Sleep must be trained like a loyal pet, one pamphlet claimed, and punished with routine until it complies. The pamphlet included a sample bedtime schedule printed in solemn copperplate script. 8 o'clock to light supper 8:45. Gentle stroll, no conversation, 9:15. Hygiene with lavender rinse 9:30. Lights dimmed 9:40. Recitation of calming verse 9:45. Silence, stillness, surrender. It sounded achievable until you tried it. Now, every minute is a marker, a measurement of your success or failure. You don't sleep anymore, you perform the appearance of readiness. And you're exhausted, not from wakefulness, but from trying so very hard to sleep properly. Historians still argue whether this obsession with disciplined rest emerged from genuine medical insight or an increasingly industrial culture trying to mechanize every human function. Either way, it meant that even in the realm of dreams, effort was expected. Sleep was no longer free, it had to be deserved. You lie still, as instructed. Your arms by your side, your legs precisely parallel, your face pointed toward the ceiling. You've read that turning on your side too early can confuse the body into wakefulness, so you remain stiff as an illustration in a hygiene manual. The room is quiet, apart from the soft thud of your own heartbeat. You count them just to keep the routine. You remember the rule, count to 100. If sleep has not arrived, rise briefly and engage in quiet reflection. You get to 86 before realizing you've begun to think about jam. Strawberry, specifically. Not helpful, so you rise. Not out of need, but out of protocol. You slip on your robe, wool and scratchy. You light a taper and move slowly to the chair by the window. You don't open the curtains, that would be deviant. You just sit, reflectively, as though being vertical will impress the sleep gods into rewarding you later. You remember that same advice manual. The chapter on slumber by self-restraint. It claimed that the truly virtuous sleeper was one who conquered desire, not just desire for excitement or company, but even the desire to sleep itself. You let that settle. Even the wanting was a form of failure. You return to bed 10 minutes later, as permitted. You extinguish the taper with a brass snuffer. You smooth the sheets, then slide in, careful not to disturb the fabric more than necessary. Once, again, you arrange your limbs. This time, facing slightly left, that's acceptable now. You're in phase 2. You close your eyes and recite the passage the doctor suggested. I am at peace. My breath is even. I am unburdened. You are none of these things. But you whisper it anyway, again and again. Like a metronome for your delusions, eventually, your mind starts to unravel. Not in a frightening way, just a loosening of knots. The routine, though exhausting, has done something. You're too tired to fight, to train to rebel. You start to forget which phase you're in. You forget to be angry. You forget the hour. And as the rhythm dulls your thoughts, you feel yourself slipping slowly, softly into that gentle gray space where sleep might finally arrive. Not because you need it, not because you want it, but because you've followed the rules, and in this house, in this century, that is the closest thing to grace. You polish the monocle with the corner of your sleeve, though you don't wear one, not really. It's decorative, inherited, utterly impractical, but tonight it serves a purpose. It's an excuse. Something to do with your hands while the rest of you pretends that you've surrendered to sleep. Sleep has not arrived, not even sent a note. So now, like so many Victorian gentlemen before you, you turn to distraction, or fine, quiet, cultivated distraction. You are enacting the gentleman's guide to not sleeping. Chapter by chapter, the first rule: maintain dignity, all costs. That means no thrashing, no muttering, no dramatic sighing. If you must suffer insomnia, do it upright, with a polished appearance and an even more polished conscience. It's not that sleep is a luxury, on the contrary, it's a duty, but failing at it should never appear uncouth. And so, you sit, robed, straight-backed, polishing a monocle like a man with too many thoughts and not enough dreams. You glance around the room. Your journal lies unopened, precisely aligned with the corner of the desk. Your walking stick leans artfully against the wall, though you haven't taken an evening walk in days. Your slippers are arranged beside the bed, toes pointing outward in a silent performance of readiness. Victorian masculinity made few allowances for sleeplessness. A man was expected to sleep like he lived, firmly, efficiently, and without fuss. Any deviation from this ideal was whispered away as delicacy or literary temperament. Poets, after all, were allowed to be restless. The rest of you were expected to sleep on schedule and without complaint. Historians still argue whether this ideal was cultivated by necessity or simply born from the relentless Victorian fear of appearing soft. Men who didn't sleep were advised to lift weights, chop wood, walk briskly before bed to expend unruly mental energy. One pamphlet recommended sitting in cold water until the brain relented, another endorsed journaling, provided it avoid over-sentimental reflections. You pick up a pen, tow with it, then set it down. You know where that road leads. Instead, you resume the gentlemanly ritual. You rise, you pace. Not anxiously, never that, but thoughtfully. You pause by the bookcase and run a finger along the spines. The Epic of Gilgamesh, Manners for Modern Men, treatises on punctuality, you choose none of them. Reading at night is discouraged, too stimulating, too engrossing, too prone to philosophical derailment. Instead, you pour yourself a small glass of something amber and medicinal. Just one. A gentleman never drinks for sleep, only for digestion. You sip it slowly, like a character in a painting. You even pose for a moment, glass in one hand, profile turned toward the fire. You imagine someone sketching you, the man who could not sleep but made it look noble. There's a phrase you remember from one of those sleep lectures you once endured: a structured mind creates a sleeping body. It was delivered by a man who looked like he hadn't slept since the Jubilee. Still, you took notes. You had a routine once. 10 pages of a neutral text, 2 minutes of candle observation, 3 stretches, a silent toast to the Queen. But lately, you've abandoned it, not from rebellion, just fatigue. Odd. Really, that sleeplessness breeds its own kind of exhaustion. Now you rely on elegance, manners, distraction in its most decorous form. You sit again, this time with your back to the fire. You close your eyes and pretend to be the kind of person who might fall asleep in an armchair. Your body does not comply, your foot twitches. Your thoughts gather again, like guests at a tedious dinner party, unwilling to leave. You try listing things in categories: 7 types of spoons, 8 virtues of the English garden, 9 regrets you dare not write down. You get stuck on number 6, always number 6. You open your eyes and set the glass down. It makes a soft clink against the table, a single sound in a room built for silence. You stand once more, pacing again. Not because it helps, but because the image matters. The gentleman at midnight, walking in soft slippers, thinking serious, sleep-adjacent thoughts, not frantic, not desperate. Just engage. You glance toward the bed. Still undisturbed, you could lie down. Try again. Perform that final act of composure. But first, you straighten a chair cushion. Fold the newspaper you didn't read. Return the monocle to its case. It's not procrastination, it's preparation. And eventually, you do return to bed. You lie back, head resting on your firm, unimpeachable pillow. Hands folded, blanket smooth, a gentleman at rest. Even in failure, you maintain the appearance of control. Even in wakefulness, you refuse to be unruly. Because in this house, and this era, and this particular brand of sleeplessness, grace is the last thing to go. You slip the velvet slippers over your feet, careful not to make a sound. The hallway beyond your bedroom stretches in familiar darkness, lit only by the faint orange glow of a taper carried low in your left hand. The carpeted floor swallows your footfalls. Every board beneath the rug knows you and your weight by now, knows where you'll pause, which step creaks if you put pressure on the instep instead of the heel. You've become, in recent weeks, a practitioner of what some call restless, walking, a quiet, shameful ritual for those whose beds refuse to hold them. It's not meant to be exercise, not meant to be seen. It is simply movement when lying still becomes unbearable. The Victorians didn't talk about it much. They spoke endlessly about how to sleep but rarely about what happened when sleep didn't come. This ritual, this silent pacing, was not officially prescribed, but it was widely practiced. So many lonely feet, muffled by slippers, gliding through the corridors of midnight, your own hallway curves gently past shuttered windows, family portraits, and heavy doors closed against the hour. Behind each one, someone may or may not be sleeping. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you are not. You pause at the stairwell, not because you intend to descend, but because the banister feels cool beneath your hand. You like that. Something real, something definite. Something that doesn't ask you to count backwards from 100 while thinking about nothing. You take another step. The candle flame shivers as you move, casting trembling shadows against the wainscoting. You look like a figure in a painting or a ghost in someone else's house. Historians still argue whether nocturnal walking was a personal failing or a private salvation. Some letters suggest it was a sign of moral unrest, souls unable to rest because of unspoken guilt. Others described it as therapeutic. "I must move," wrote one insomniac clergyman in 1871, "for my thoughts must stretch their legs when my body cannot." You relate. Your body isn't asking for sleep anymore. It's asking for silence in motion. To keep moving, not toward a goal, but away from the burden of staying still. You walk past the grandfather clock silent at this hour, past the sitting room curtains drawn, chairs orderly, as though awaiting a visit from more punctual times, past the writing desk with its inkwell capped, its blotter square, its secrets folded neatly into drawers. You pause at the window. You don't open the curtain, just press your forehead gently to the glass, cool and smooth. You imagine fog pressing back from the other side. Or moonlight, or nothing at all. It's a comfort, somehow, that out there, the world remains unbothered by your insomnia. You think of your father, who walked the same halls when he couldn't sleep. You remember the soft creak of the floorboards under his weight. You remember his slippers. You think of the slippers you're wearing now and wonder if he ever thought of his father when walking in them. In some families, sleep is a legacy. In others, it's a curse. You continue. The rhythm of walking becomes its own lullaby. One step, another, turn, return, down the length of the hallway and back again. Your mind stops sprinting. It stops offering solutions. It simply walks with you, a companion finally too tired to argue. You do not think of the day to come. You do not plan. You do not worry about appearances, because for once, you are not trying to sleep. You are simply escaping the performance of trying. Eventually, you feel it, the shift. That quiet pull of fatigue that isn't forced or manufactured or measured. It just arrives. Not because you earned it, but because your mind has wandered far enough away from the bed that it can finally be lured back. You stop walking. Your candle has nearly burned down. The wax drips onto your knuckles. You don't flinch. You turn back. Slippers whispering. Door easing open. The cold press of linen as you crawl beneath it. The mattress no longer feels like a test. It simply feels horizontal. You exhale. The room greets you not as a judge, but as a witness. And this time, perhaps, you will not need to leave again. The house doesn't stir. You're still wrapped in the bed, limbs slightly askew, covers a little tangled, one slipper half on beneath the sheets for reasons you don't recall. There's no fire left in the grate, only the soft perfume of ash and yesterday's warmth. The clock still ticks, but its rhythm feels far away now, like the heartbeat of a ship anchored just offshore. You blink slowly in the dark, unsure of whether you've truly slept. Maybe you did. Maybe you drifted off for a minute, or 30, or maybe you just hovered near the edge of sleep, grazing its surface like a cautious swimmer who never quite goes under. But something's changed. There's less tension in your shoulders. Your thoughts are quieter now, like guests who finally taken the hint and stopped trying to make conversation. And though the bed is no more comfortable than it was hours ago, you no longer feel like it's punishing you. That might be enough. You lie still and listen to the house. Its silence is no longer hostile, just present. The pipes aren't groaning. The windows don't rattle. Even the wind outside has decided to tiptoe past the shutters rather than announce itself. You begin to wonder if you've reached the edge of something. The edge of sleep, the edge of the effort to achieve it. The very end of Victorian sleep doctrine, with all its rituals, its tinctures, its mechanical pillows, and its butter lettuce sandwiches. You remember the first time you were told that sleep was something you had to work for, that stillness had to be trained, that silence had to be engineered, that dreams only came to the morally deserving. All those ideas layered on like blankets until you were no longer trying to rest, but trying to pass a test in stillness, discipline, and polite helplessness. And now, somehow, you've made it through. You didn't fall asleep on command. You didn't master the silence cure or surrender entirely to laudanum. You just outlasted the night. And you're not the only one. Across town, in rooms with the same wallpaper, the same slippers, the same bottles of valerian root lined up like silent monks, others are stirring too. Quietly victorious, groggy, unsure, but still here. You think again of that old idea that sleep is a moral barometer, a sign of inner peace, a reflection of a quiet mind. But you've learned otherwise. Sometimes, the people who sleep best are the ones least concerned with deserving it. And sometimes, those who struggle most are the ones most determined to earn what cannot be earned. Victorian sleep collapsed under its own weight. Eventually, even the most starched, lace-curtained households admitted that perhaps the problem wasn't the person but the expectation. That rest is not discipline, it's mercy, and mercy, you realize, is what you've needed all along. Not a better tonic, not a tighter bedtime. Just the permission to lie here awake, flawed, human, and not be punished for it. You shift once more, this time without guilt. The blanket wrinkles, the pillow sighs. You close your eyes not because you must, but because you want to. You are tired, you are quiet, you are not broken. And the night, at long last, begins to lift. Now, you let your breath slow, in and out. The air in the room is still, and the weight of your body feels softer now, heavier in a calming way, like the bed is holding you instead of judging you. You don't have to think anymore. You don't have to solve, or count, or question. There are no more cures to test, no more rituals to perfect. You've done enough for one night. Let the room fade. Let the wallpaper patterns dissolve into shadow. Let the sound of the clock grow softer, slower, like it's ticking from beneath a pillow. The curtains are still drawn, and that velvet dark now wraps around your shoulders like something warm and gentle. Outside, the sky may be lightening, just a little, but in here, you're not racing the sun. You're floating now, quietly, between then and now, between trying and letting go. If a thought comes to you, it's okay to let it pass like a soft breeze through a window cracked just an inch. No one's asking anything of you anymore. Not the doctors, not the hour, not even yourself. And if sleep comes now or even later, you'll greet it not as a cure, not as a duty, but as a quiet companion who finally arrived, not because you summoned it, but because you stopped chasing it. So rest now, or simply be still. You made it, that's enough. Good night.